It's 1:30 a.m. Most people are asleep. But somewhere in the world, a different kind of person is still awake. The one who understands something dangerous. Power is not always about muscles. It is not always about money. And it is definitely not always about intelligence. Sometimes, power is about influence. About knowing exactly what to say, when to stay silent, and how to make people move without them even realizing they are being moved. Have you ever noticed something strange? Some people walk into a room, and instantly, the energy changes. They don't beg for attention. They don't talk too much. They don't try to impress anyone. Yet somehow, everyone listens. Everyone watches. Everyone feels their presence. Why? Because they understand one terrifying truth about human nature. Human beings are not ruled by logic. They are ruled by emotion. And whoever controls emotion, controls people. This is where the real game begins. Today, we enter the mind of one of history's most feared political thinkers. The man whose ideas were considered so dangerous, his name itself became a warning. Manipulative, cold, strategic, ruthless, Machiavellian. But here's the uncomfortable question. What if Machiavelli wasn't evil? What if he was simply honest about how the world actually works? Because Machiavelli did something most people are too afraid to do. He stripped away illusions. He did not see humans as noble creatures. He saw them for what they become under pressure. Selfish, fearful, greedy, emotional, easily influenced. And that is exactly why his teachings still scare people today. Because deep down, you already know he might be right. Think about your own life. How many times have you trusted someone because they sounded confident? How many times have you obeyed someone just because everyone else obeyed them? How many times have your emotions made decisions, while your mind created excuses afterward? That's the first secret. Most people think they make rational decisions. They don't. They feel first. They justify later. Read that again. They feel first. They justify later. That means if someone can influence what you feel, they can influence what you choose. And if they influence what you choose, they influence your life. Scary, isn't it? Now here is something even darker. The most powerful manipulators do not force control. They make you believe the decision was yours. That's the genius of psychological power. No chains, no violence, no shouting, just subtle influence. And suddenly, you trust them, you follow them, you defend them, without realizing you are already under their control. This is why Machiavelli wrote one of the most chilling ideas ever. It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both. That sentence shocked the world. Because it attacked one of humanity's favorite fantasies. The fantasy that kindness alone wins. Machiavelli disagreed. He believed love is fragile. Love depends on emotion. Emotion changes. People say they love you today. Tomorrow they betray you. Why? Because humans are loyal, until loyalty becomes inconvenient. That's dark. But if you observe carefully, you'll see examples everywhere. Friendships destroyed by jealousy. Relationships broken by temptation. Alliances shattered by greed. Promises broken under pressure. People change. Especially when something valuable is at stake. Machiavelli understood this deeply. He knew one brutal truth. Never build your power on human loyalty alone. Because loyalty without pressure means nothing. Character is revealed under pressure, not comfort. This brings us to the first law of power. Perception is stronger than reality. Let that sink in. Perception is stronger than reality. People do not respond to truth. They respond to what they believe is true. That means image matters. Aura matters. Reputation matters. The way people perceive you changes how they treat you. A weak man with strength hidden inside may still get disrespected. A dangerous man with controlled silence may be feared without lifting a finger. Why? Because perception creates emotional response. And emotional response creates behavior. That is power. The moment you understand this, you start seeing the hidden game everywhere. Politics, business, relationships, friend circles, social media, everywhere. Most people think communication is about words. No, words are only surface level. Real communication happens underneath. Tone, timing, eye contact, silence, confidence, scarcity, emotional pressure. These invisible signals often speak louder than words. And the people who master these signals become extremely difficult to resist. Now here's the question. Why are you learning this? To manipulate others? No, that would be foolish. Because the deeper reason to understand dark psychology is protection. Once you understand manipulation, you stop being easily manipulated. You notice patterns. You notice emotional traps. You notice guilt tactics. You notice fake charm. You notice power games. And once you see the game loses power over you. But we are just entering Machiavelli's world. And trust me, it gets much darker. Because next, we'll talk about how powerful people use fear, desire, and human weakness to shape behavior without direct control. And once you understand that, you will never look at people the same way again. Let's go deeper. Because everything so far was only the surface. Now we enter the machinery of control. And to understand control, you must first understand weakness. Not physical weakness. Psychological weakness. Machiavelli understood something terrifying. Every human being has buttons. Invisible buttons. Press the right one, and behavior changes. Sometimes instantly. Some people are controlled by fear. Fear of rejection. Fear of loss. Fear of loneliness. Fear of being judged. Others are controlled by desire. Desire for love. Desire for status. Desire for validation. Desire for pleasure. And some are controlled by ego. This is one of the most powerful weaknesses of all. Because ego makes people predictable. Praise them, and they open up. Challenge them, and they become emotional. Ignore them, and many become desperate for attention. Watch carefully. Most people don't react to reality. They react to what their ego feels. That's why emotional mastery is rare. The average person believes they are thinking. But often, they are reacting. Reacting to triggers. Reacting to insecurity. Reacting to emotional pressure. And the person who remains calm while others react usually gains control of the situation. That is why silence is dangerous. Most people are uncomfortable with silence. Silence creates tension. And humans hate unresolved tension. Notice what happens during an argument. One person attacks. The other expects immediate defense. But imagine this. Instead of reacting, you stay calm. You say nothing. You just look. Suddenly the dynamic changes. Why? Because emotional people expect emotional reactions. When they don't get one, they lose rhythm. Their certainty weakens. Their emotions rise. Your silence becomes psychological pressure. This is why powerful people do not always speak more. Sometimes, they speak less. And every word carries weight. Machiavelli understood another brutal law. People respect what feels scarce. Scarcity creates value. Read that carefully. Scarcity creates value. What is always available becomes ordinary. What feels rare becomes desirable. This applies to everything. Attention, time, energy, presence, even approval. If you constantly chase people, you lower perceived value. If your attention is available to everyone at all times, it loses psychological weight. But when your energy becomes selective, people notice. Humans naturally value what seems difficult to access. That's why mystery creates attraction. The unknown pulls attention. The human brain hates gaps. It wants closure. It wants answers. That is why mysterious people fascinate others. Not because mystery itself is magical. Because uncertainty creates obsession. Think about it. Why do people overthink mixed signals? Why do they obsess over unanswered messages? Why does emotional uncertainty consume attention? Because the mind keeps searching for resolution. And whoever occupies mental space holds power. This is where another dark principle appears. Control attention. Control emotion. Control behavior. That chain runs deeper than most realize. Attention is the gateway. Before someone can influence you, they must first capture your focus. That's why modern systems fight for your attention. Billions are spent to understand one thing: how to keep your eyes locked. Why? Because attention leads to influence. Influence shapes belief. Belief shapes behavior. And behavior creates power. Machiavelli would have loved studying the modern world. Because manipulation today is more subtle than ever. No king. No throne. No visible dictator. Just algorithms, social pressure, status games, and emotional engineering. And most people don't even realize it. They think they are choosing freely. Sometimes they are. Sometimes they are being guided. This brings us to one of the darkest truths. The strongest control is invisible. When force is visible, resistance appears. When control feels natural, resistance disappears. That is why the most dangerous manipulators rarely look dangerous. They may appear charming, kind, helpful, warm. That's what makes them effective. They disarm suspicion. Then they influence. This is why charm can be a weapon. Not all charm is fake. But charm without integrity becomes manipulation. A smile can hide intention. Kind words can hide strategy. Warmth can hide calculation. And unless you understand human psychology, You may confuse emotional comfort with trustworthiness. Big mistake. Very big mistake. Because trust should not be built on feelings alone. It should be built on patterns. Patterns reveal truth. Words can lie. Emotions can mislead. Patterns expose reality. Watch actions over time. Watch consistency. Watch behavior under pressure. That reveals character. Not polished words. Machiavelli always looked beneath appearance. He asked, what motivates people when masks fall? That question alone can change your life. Because everyone wears masks. Social masks. Professional masks. Relationship masks. Friendly masks. But pressure removes masks. Under pressure, truth leaks out. Greed leaks out. Fear leaks out. Jealousy leaks out. Intentions leak out. That is why wise people observe calmly. They don't rush trust. They don't rush emotional attachment. They watch. They listen. They notice what others miss. And that observation creates power. But we're still not at the deepest level. Because next, we enter the most dangerous weapon in Machiavelli's world. Fear. And once you understand how fear shapes obedience, you'll begin to see why entire nations, companies, and even relationships can be controlled without physical force. Now we arrive at the darkest weapon of all. Fear. Not violence. Not force. Fear. Because fear does something extraordinary to the human mind. It narrows focus. It weakens logic. It increases obedience. When fear enters the mind, freedom starts leaving. That is why Machiavelli studied fear so deeply. He understood something most people ignore. Fear creates compliance faster than law. Love inspires. Fear controls. That is why so many power structures throughout history relied on fear. Kings used it. Empire used it. Armies used it. Governments used it. Even families and relationships sometimes use it. Not always openly. Sometimes subtly. Fear of punishment. Fear of abandonment. Fear of exclusion. Fear of losing status. Fear of losing approval. The method changes. The psychology stays the same. Once someone becomes afraid of losing something valuable, their behavior changes. This is why emotional dependence can become dangerous. The more your peace depends on external validation, the easier you are to control. Think carefully. If your happiness depends on praise, praise controls you. If your identity depends on approval, approval controls you. If your confidence depends on attention, attention controls you. And that leads to a brutal truth. The person who needs less often holds more power. Why? Because desperation creates vulnerability. Neediness creates predictability. Predictability creates control. This is why internal stability matters. The less emotionally desperate you are, the harder you are to manipulate. Machiavelli understood another principle. People often fear loss more than they value gain. This is one of humanity's deepest psychological patterns. People may ignore opportunity, but the moment they sense loss, emotion explodes. That is why threats work. That is why scarcity works. That is why urgency works. Because fear of loss activates powerful emotional responses. But there is something even darker. Sometimes people willingly surrender freedom just to feel safe. Read that again. Sometimes people willingly surrender freedom just to feel safe. That is how invisible control grows. People accept control when it feels protective. And this is where awareness becomes essential. Because not every leader is evil. Not every authority is manipulative. But every system influences behavior. The real question is, are you aware of the influence? Or are you unconscious? That is the difference. Because unconscious minds are easy to control. Conscious minds are difficult to manipulate. That is the ultimate lesson. Machiavelli's teachings were never truly about becoming a monster. They were about seeing reality without illusion. Seeing power. Seeing motives. Seeing hidden incentives. Seeing human nature clearly. And that clarity gives you protection. Now here's the final truth. The greatest power is not controlling others. It is controlling yourself. Let that sink in. The person who cannot control anger can be manipulated through anger. The person who cannot control desire can be manipulated through desire. The person who cannot control ego can be manipulated through ego. The person who cannot control fear can be manipulated through fear. So before trying to understand others, understand yourself. Know your weaknesses. Know your emotional triggers. Know what makes you reactive. Because your unmastered mind is someone else's opportunity. This is why self-awareness is power. Self-control is power. Emotional discipline is power. The strongest person in the room is not always the loudest. Not always the richest. Not always the most feared. Sometimes, The strongest person is the one who remains calm while chaos spreads. The one who sees clearly while others panic. The one who thinks while others react. That person becomes extremely dangerous to manipulation. Because once you master your own mind, external control weakens. And maybe that was Machiavelli's darkest lesson of all. The world is full of games. Power games. Status games. Psychological games. Some people will try to control you through fear. Some through desire. Some through guilt. Some through charm. Some through attention. But none of those methods work easily on a mind that is awake. So don't use this knowledge to exploit people. Use it to protect yourself. Use it to see through illusions. Use it to become harder to deceive. Because in a world full of manipulation, awareness becomes armor. And once your eyes open, you can never unsee the game. You start noticing everything. The subtle pressure, the emotional hooks, the invisible power moves. And then, something changes. You stop reacting automatically. You start choosing consciously. That is freedom. Real freedom. Not freedom from rules. Freedom from unconscious control. So the question is no longer, how do I control everyone? The real question is, who controls your mind? And if the answer is fear, desire, ego, or validation, then the game has already begun. Choose wisely.